Welcome to Horry County Community Digest.info. I'm your host and fellow Horry County and Herb Malsman. We are sitting outside of Starbucks right now at Long Bay Resort. Lots of sounds going on. The sounds of after the season, all the construction work and the painting and the sanding and the grinding and what's going on, cutting the trees down. So I guess this happens in the off season. Everybody's gone and the work begins. First, let me relate before I introduce our guest this week on the Digest. One of my many jobs, I was a telemarketer in New York City with New York Veteran Police Association. And it was a noble cause, I thought. And there was this one telemarketer, whenever he couldn't reach anybody, he would say, "You're harder to reach than Jackie Kennedy Onassis." And the boss would say, "Nobody's harder to reach than Jackie Kennedy Onassis." That's the way it was back then. Now, my guest today, we've been in touch over the last 6 or 7 months, but this is the first time we're actually sitting down. You're harder to sit down with than whoever. How you doing? This is Jerry Dalton Productions. I guess it's Dalton Productions.
Dalton Productions.
Philson.
It's Dalton Pictures, and we are a media company mainly working in the film industry.
That's your main film. Now, the first time we met, you were at Hampton Inn here.
Yes.
On 17, Business 17. You were doing auditions, some sort of a casting call. How'd that go, and did you find anybody? And that was about a year and a half ago.
Yes. We've got a modeling and talent agency, which is run by another lady, but it's under Dalton Pictures and Entertainment. It's called Pro Models Inc., Pro Talent Inc., and it's run by Mary Beth Howard here at the beach. And that was to what happens is we do also commercial work outside the film industry. Like last year we did the Fox Bowl, and just got done with a contract with the military where we had to use some extras. So we always found trouble finding people at the last moment for talent, and it's like, why don't we have our own? And that's how that came into being.
Okay, I know you can't talk about what you did with the government.
Right.
Is there anything you can talk about, Eddie? Anything you could talk about? I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah, we did. I was a consultant on a media project for the United States Air Force, United States Navy, and ICE. ICE was unclassified. The other two are classified. One thing I can tell you inside the other two is I got to shoot a war scene in Iraq, which was pretty cool. That was fun. Basically, it's consulting, but I also did some shooting, scripting, and editing in preparation for the delivery of the content that was delivered to those agencies.
You were actually in Iraq for this, or it was a setup?
It was shot in Charleston.
It was shot in Charleston, right. But also looks like Iraq.
Yeah, it does. What we did was we found an old driving range where there was an old sand hill, and we went out and pulled all the weeds and everything, and we kept the camera tight so that you couldn't see any of the surrounding greenery. And it was hot enough. It was in August, so it was 105 degrees that day, a heat index. So everybody was sweating. It looked real.
So that's how Charleston becomes Iraq.
Yes.
Holy cow, that's amazing. You were in Los Angeles for a while. You did a thing with a Chinese audience, a Chinese group. Talk about that, and then we'll get into filmmaking a little bit. Give us how'd that go and what was happening there.
Okay, yeah, I work in Los Angeles it seems to be more and more. I guess that's because where the industry hub is. But I was taken out there to speak to the Chinese film delegation. The Chinese film delegation is the actual government because they oversee all the media there. And they do that for a cultural review board so that they make sure that they want to maintain a standard of culture there. They took me out there because China only allows 20 films in from around the world into China every year. And they're wanting to increase that, but yet at the same time, they're concerned about their cultural issues. And I think they took me out there because they realized that I'm very sensitive to cultural issues, and I think everybody deserves their own identity. And that includes them, that includes me, that includes Germany, France, wherever it's coming from, everybody has their own culture, and it should be respected. I think that they think that a lot of our films sometimes don't reach for the highest standards as far as culture, but they realize that the United States is the best in filmmaking. Technically, no one can come close. We are the leader in the world, and our marketing abilities. They're 30, 40 years behind in marketing, and so I spoke to them. There's a possibility that they may come here for the Myrtle Beach International Film Festival, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to be the conduit for content to go in and out of China through the United States. And so what they're looking for is a gatekeeper that can kind of help to oversee so that they're not bombarded by content. So we kind of filter it out before it gets there.
Okay, I was supposed to go to China a few years ago with Orbis International, and they sent me to the Chinese consulate in New York City, and I was turned down. United Airlines was flying me over. It was going to be great. First time I had been to Asia, still have never been there, and they were tired of the bad foreign press, so they didn't allow me the visa, and we thought, well, maybe I'll just go with the visitor's visa and do the interviews that way. And I mean, you could hang in some countries for that. That is a violation. I could have been doing time today because of that. So China was. It would have been interesting to go there.
Yeah, you would have been in jail probably if they'd have caught you with your media coming out.
Yeah, doing media and just on a visitor's visa. You spent some time in Wilmington, and I know that Dennis Hopper did the Blue Velvet in Wilmington. It was a great film, and he loved Wilmington so much. He has his studios. He's passed away since, but he has his studios. Have you been there? Have you been involved with that studio at all?
Yeah, we have sent some people for castings up there to one of their agencies, and in fact my daughter had a part on Eastbound and Down on HBO series. She got a part, and she went up and she tried out, and when she came back she had the part. They called her, she had the part within 3 hours, and she said we had not seen the show Eastbound and Down, and when we got back we flipped on the television. She's 12 years old, and the content was pretty harsh. And I said, okay. I said, you're getting old enough. I said, if there was certain elements involved, I'd put the hammer down. But this is going to be your deal. Because she's been in 2 movies and been in 1 television show. And I said, because it's huge to have on your resume, being on an HBO show, or a series. And we watched it, and it was pretty foul. She went up, she came back down, and I said, have you made a decision? She said, I've already called. She said, I thank you very much for the opportunity, but if you could consider me next time, I'm going to pass on this one. And Mark Fincannon of Fincannon Associates, they're the big casting agent there. They got an office in Atlanta and Dallas. He called me and talked to me, and he's a devout Christian, and he said, I just wanted to tell you, I thought very highly of your daughter for turning that down. I said, yes, but you're the one casting for this show. He said, yes, but he said, I'm also a Christian, and he said, it put big marks up on the calendar for her. So we do work some inside Wilmington. We are not the casting agency. Fincannon Associates is a casting agency there, but we work with them. Mainly we work out of Los Angeles. We work some with a partner to Universal Studio, and then we do a lot with independents out there, which is independents was everything underneath the major 8. And where we got into that was through our connections with theater. I have working relations with the bookers inside the major theaters so that we can book films, and that's kind of hard to come by.
Right. Cape Fear, or the film, both times, twice, it was a great movie. But the inspiration came from Cape Fear River in Wilmington, but it wasn't filmed there. But that was the inspiration. The writer of the story would sit in this restaurant looking at Cape Fear River, and he came up with the idea for Cape Fear, but it wasn't actually done in Wilmington.
Right. A lot of times movies are shot in other places. Like there's been scenes shot for South America and in the Middle East, up in North Carolina. You were talking about Blue Velvet. We were just discussing Blue Velvet last night. I said it's one of the best 5 minutes in film, kind of like the Jack Nicholson, Tom Cruise scene in A Few Good Men right there in the courtroom. One of those, when I was in Los Angeles 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a gaffer that was on the set, and he said that the day that happened, there was a completely different feeling when Nicholson and Cruise showed up, because Nicholson just paced back and forth and was very angry and wouldn't talk to anybody. And he said when the cameras hit, everybody had goosebumps because they knew that was it. I mean, that was one of those magic moments. And it was like almost one of those one-take deals. It was done. And he said he had been in the character for 24 hours prior to that. And the other scene that we were talking about, the best 5 minutes, when you're talking about Blue Velvet, is when Frank and Ben are in the apartment. You remember which scene I'm talking about? Right. That was just one of the magical moments of film, I thought. Right. A little disturbing, but still was a great piece of work.
The whole film, right from the ear. I mean, I don't want to give anything away, but folks, if you haven't seen Blue Velvet, and it's a very bizarre, the imagery is just intense.
David Lynch.
Yeah. David Lynch? Yeah, David Lynch. Okay, let's move on to a film that you did a while ago, and somehow you lost it on the computer, And one of the early on when we were talking about meeting up to do this interview, you were involved something about a digital download, and you couldn't get the film, it couldn't be brought up, you couldn't upload, download. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
There's been a lot of issues like that at the end. A lot of things go on behind the scenes that people do not realize. In the distribution of film, when we book a film in a theater, we'll book it nationwide, we have to prepare the prints. We'll take prints and turn them into digital prints, which is called DCP DCI, which we do. And a lot of times in this transcoding, it's trillions of bytes of information. And if one bit is wrong, it doesn't work. And sometimes that happens in the encoding process. We had a film that was coming from Canada, and of course, we're always learning on the curve. One thing I learned about Canada is you never put a price on a item that is going across the border because it's going to get stopped in customs. We had a film that was opening on Friday that was stuck in customs on Monday, and we had 48 hours worth of work to do on the film before it went out and shipped. And then it has to be ingested into the servers that are around the country, which takes another 18 hours. And then shipping and everything else. So we had this film stuck in customs, and we're calling customs, and they won't release it. And all it is this massive hard drive. And they're like, well, we don't know what's on it. I said, it's a film, open it up, take it wherever we need this thing now. But we'd put a value on this hard drive. And that's what stopped it. If we'd have placed a value of $0 or $10 on it, it would have came right through. Where it's just the opposite in Europe. If you place a value of 0, it's getting stopped. And if you have a hefty value on it, they're going to let it through.
Do we place too much emphasis on technology? Do we still have projection booths and guys putting the film in the little spot over there when you change the film over? Are we dependent too much on technology, and if something goes wrong, we lose it all? Or is it film better? I mean, actual film.
Well, film is there's a depth of color in film that's hard to achieve with digital. Everything is going digital. Everything will be digital in 3 to 5 years. It'll be all digital. They may still produce with film, but it'll still be transferred over to digital delivery in the end, mainly because of the cost. There's another flip side to that, which I'll remind me to talk about because it's called the virtual print fee. And virtual print fee, I kind of liken it to the Hollywood Mafia. It's a group of people that sit in an office, and a lot of people thought when this digital era come along, it was going to be great because we don't have to buy $1,500 reels of film anymore and ship them and insure them and everything else. It's just everything's going to be on a digital hard drive, or we can use a satellite system to upload and download. This company has representatives of all the 8 major firms, all the 8 major companies. You have to pay them a fee of $1,200, $1,500 per screen to play a digital to roll out digital across the servers to this company. Now, the company doesn't handle the film, they don't produce the film, they just get a check for every time the film plays on the screen. And they'll tell a theater company, that's fine, you don't have to deal with us, we're just not going to send you any content anymore. So if the major 8 are not sending you content anymore, your theater's pretty well done. But with the film has a richness, and that's why a lot of times they'll still shoot on film, transfer to digital. But with the new Red cameras, the Phantom cameras, Panavision has a digital camera that's awesome. It made it affordable for independents to produce film. You don't have to start out with $6 to $10 million because of your stock and everything else, and then roll reels off to roll them out. So I prefer digital. There are problems with digital, as there's problems with everything in the engineering world, but by and far, we can roll out 1,000 prints here or in our studio in Loris, to where we was never able to do that before. It had to be sent to Technicolor or Dulux.
There's an IMAX theater here at Broadway at the beach, and they don't have the actual films there. What happens is they have an antenna up on the roof, and it's beamed in.
Mm-hmm. That's done prior to the show because it's just so large. The files are so large, and then it's placed on a server. And then that server, and there's software that encodes the footage that's coming in, so it's wrapped in an MXF wrapper, but it's not the same MXF wrapper that's on the traditional non-linear editing systems. And that's so that the server can see it. It's still shown in 24 frames a second. IMAX, they have the 70 millimeter, which is twice the size of the 35 millimeter print roller. And Carmike Cinema is a completely all digital cinema nationwide. Regal and AMC will be there in 2 years, and so will Cinemark. The smaller theater companies are on their way too. So phase 2 of the digital delivery is out. So within 3 years, all cinemas will be digital.
Okay. Was I supposed to remind you of something to speak about?
We talked about it.
You already
Yeah, it was the VP fees.
The what?
Virtual print fees.
You got it. Okay, now, and then you would
That's
think...
a great gig, isn't it?
But
To sit in an office and get $1,000 per screen or $1,200 per screen for every movie plan.
It reminds me of Gene Autry when he had this little ring. Gene Autry, he was a multimillionaire, and you were sending in 52 quarters to get this ring, and he had this all figured out. He could hit the envelope and do something, and the quarters would flying out into this basket, and he loved hitting that envelopes, and they go...
Right.
Somehow we split that thing, so $50 and $50. This guy made a fortune on 50 cents.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. How does a weightlifter? You've done some mixed martial arts as well. How did a weightlifter become a movie mogul? What's the transition there?
The bodybuilding and fighting was a long time ago. That was 20 years. That was more than 20 years ago. It was 24 years ago. But I used to bodybuild, and I boxed and fought some, and. But that was back in the late 80s. I had my choice when I was coming out of high school. I was accepted either into culinary school, which was cooking, or film school. And I always liked film since I was a kid, and I also liked cooking. Since I had to pay for it myself, and I took a year between high school and going to college, and I worked in a steel mill to save the money. I made probably what would be considered a wiser decision, because film school at that time, 1 in 1,000, you get a job in the industry. It was basically made for people in the industry or people on trust funds or whatever. It was just kind of having fun. So I took culinary school, which is 1 in 100. That's 100%. If you're good, you're going to get a job. It may not be the job you want, but you're going to get a job. So I took culinary school, and then I went on to master in pastries. And in Myrtle Beach, we had I went and traveled a little bit, left here, went out west and lived for a while, pastry chef type gigs, came back and actually opened up a little cafe inside Gold's Gym in 1988 called Hard Body Cafe, which mixed the bodybuilding and food preparation. And it was preparing food for health conscious people, bodybuilders and all that. And then a bakery came up for sale up behind Blockbuster on 76th Avenue. And we purchased that. We had that for 4 years. We were open for 4 years. We were up for Bakery of the Year in the United States. And a corporation come along, slid a check across the table to me and said, "You ready to sell?" And I was tired because you're 5 a.m. in the morning until 10 o'clock at night every evening. Wore out. I accepted. And so we sold 30 days after that. And my wife and I, we built a house in Pine Lakes. When I say we built a house, we physically did everything with the exception of electric, heating and air, and plumbing. We did everything, her and I. It took us a year to do it. And my father was a builder, so I grew up in that industry. I knew how to do it, just didn't like to do it, but I did it. But anyway, we did that, and end result was I got back to film, which is where I wanted to begin with anyway, so roundabout trip. But I always kept dabbling in film and independent film. Even when we had the bakery and the restaurant, I kept dabbling in it. And anytime I could get my fingers in it up in Wilmington or whatever, I did.
The pastry business, fingers, that kind of makes sense a little bit. In the pre-interview, we were talking about when we first met at Hampton Inn, you were doing auditions there, and a kid came in, I guess he was around 15 years old, 14, 15 years, with his mother, I think. And what impressed me watching this whole thing was he sang, and he sounded good, and you liked him, but he was missing some notes, and you thought he had a sinus infection, which he did. How did that come to you? I mean, can you relate to that? Do you recall that?
I guess through trial and error and experience. It's kind of like anybody who does what they do in life, whether it be a person who works on automobiles. The average layman's not going to get a low-end knock in the engine or whatever. They're going to get it. They're going to know what it is because I guess they've been there. Their ear and their eye and their senses are trained to do what they do. And I think a lot of times that's what takes a person from being good at what they do to being great at what they do, is how well those senses are honed.
Right. I was watching David O. Selznick last night, The Making of Gone with the Wind. Have you seen that on TCM? I mean, The Making of Gone, it was a nightmare and also a wonderful experience. And and then when you look at Vivian Leigh finally, and you look at the finished film, I can't imagine how anybody else would have been considered for that role. But have you seen that? And give us a brief how it goes producing a film, and give us a little overview. I
didn't get to see that. That is, I know that's a lot of people's favorite film. My wife included, Gone with the Wind. It is a true, I guess it is a true epic. I don't know if it was the one that set the standards for epic, but it is a true epic. There are always nightmares in the film production, and if on the independent side, I guess it's because you don't have enough money. On the higher end side, it's because things go wrong. Producing a film, we've got 2 projects right now that for financing. One is a film in. It was designed to go into Italy, but we've changed it to go to South America, and that's for distribution and marketing purposes because we have a lot more avenues there. But of course, I'd rather shoot in northern Italy because who wouldn't? Yeah, but and then another one in and that's a film. It's a love story. It's called Isabella. And another one that we've got out right now, which I'll meet the fellow in New York City in a couple weeks, is about northern Cyprus, and that's more of a documentary about the destruction of all the churches. There's been 550 Christian churches destroyed in northern Cyprus. That's an island below Greece. And I was over in Europe in July at the European Union Parliament in Brussels, and I gave a speech to a couple nations on media and bringing media there, then bringing media here. And this Greek Cypriot, who was an MP, which is like a representative of their area, came up to me, and he actually had tears in his eyes, and he said, "Is there anything you can do about this thing in Cyprus?" And I said, "What thing in Cyprus?" And he started describing to me, and he was very, very taken by it, and so we started looking into it, and now we have a proposal over there. Okay, on the film side, when you start a film, the first thing you should do, there's 2 different types of filmmakers. One is your art filmmaker, and that's your person who really, they don't care if anyone sees that film or not. They don't have to be in the business. They don't have to make money. They just do it because it's an art form. Kind of like someone who just paints a painting and they really don't care whether anyone sees it. But on the majority of filmmakers, they want to turn it into a business. They want to work in the industry. So you have to approach things differently. When you approach a film from the call it the trust fund filmmakers, the art filmmakers, you don't have to follow any rules. You can do whatever you want. But when you approach it from the other side where you want to get in the business, there are certain rules that apply. One of the first things you have to do when you look at shooting a film is looking at what works and what doesn't. There's only been one major model that works in the industry, and that's the Hollywood business model. And when you look at the Hollywood business model, it's completely 180 degrees from the independent business model, because they have the suits, which is your business people, and they have the marketers get a hold of this film before a director or anybody ever looks at it. And they decide whether that film is going to be marketable or not. And if it's not marketable, it doesn't go anywhere. It's in the can. The film has to be marketable before it's made. So instead of making the film that you've always wanted to make and you really don't care how marketable it is, the film has to be marketable. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't combine the both. You just may have to change up a few things. So when you start to make a film, if you're looking at it from the business side, one of the things you have to do is look, can I sell this film? Who wants to see it? And hang on just a second, please.
Got the phone going. You're listening to Horry County Community Digest.info. I'm your host and fellow Horry County and Herb Malzman. Our guest is Jerry Dalton of Dalton
Pictures.
Dalton Pictures. Are you gonna? What's happening?
A phone call coming in from California, but I'll get it back later.
Long distance from California, sure is.
Yes, but that's one thing. Another thing. In that respect, you've gotten. I don't know if you've gotten emails from me at 3 or 4 in the morning, because that's when we communicate with Europe. I'm gonna have to be up early, up late. It seems like it's a 19, 20-hour day job, but I don't mind it because I love it. I love the industry. But going back to the filmmakers, if you've got a film that you want to make, is it marketable? And before you go to start producing this film, make sure that you have P&A funds. That's prints and advertising funds. A lot of times we get a hold of films, $10, $20 million film, beautiful film. We had one that was shot with Faye Dunaway in Paris and in Moscow, and also some in California. And a lot of top stars in it, and they spent every single dollar in the production, and they had nothing left, and they were hoping that someone would pick it up. We do distribute and rep films, but rarely do we get behind them. That's a risky business. And so if you've placed $16, $20 million in your film, you should at least save some millions for prints and advertising, or it's not really going to go anywhere. More than likely, that's kind of like winning the lottery. People do win the lottery every day, but you don't want to risk your life on it.
Gone with the Wind, some people didn't think it was marketable. It was a 1,000-page book, and the original cut was like 5.5 hours, and what do you do about it? And Margaret Mitchell, she sold it for $50,000, the film rights. $50,000, that was it, in 1936 or whatever. And they wanted her to get involved in the production. She said, I sold you the book, I sold you the film rights, I want no more to do with it.
Right.
She wanted no part of it. You got it. Run with it. Whatever you do is fine.
Right.
So
$50,000 back then was good up front. I suppose she never thought it was going to be quite the success of what it was. But when you look at well, that was a film of a different magnitude. But there are headaches, and once again, it is a business. Going back, you have to have a strategic plan of delivery for your film if you're going to make one. Unless you're just, like I said, unless you're just making it as a kind of like a resume. Like people who make shorts make resumes, they send it to film festivals, hopefully it gets seen, and an investor will come up and back their feature film.
Well, to this day, dollar for dollar, the value of money today, till this day with Avatar and the billions and millions, Gone with the Wind is still pound for pound the number one grossing film of all time.
Yes, it is. Yep. And there was one.
I mean, I was paying 35 cents to get into a movie house back then in the 40s and 50s. So you can't compare the two.
No, and back then they didn't quite have the delivery of mass media that we have today through television and the hype. When you think about an average film, the average advertising budget on a film is right now is $42.5 million, and you think that's going to be spent in 8 weeks. Right. That'll build one of these smaller hotels here, and it's just dropped in 6 weeks and gone.
Sure.
So they have to kind of know what they're doing when it comes to that. They didn't have that back then. It had to be done on a lower key, and much more off the value of the film instead of the hype of the film. You know, the story, the content. Did you leave feeling something? Today, it's a lot of it's flash. When you look at the films that do very well, it's because they're marketed well.
Right. The Big Lebowski is my favorite. What do you think of Big Lebowski? Am I right in thinking that's one of the great films of all time?
There's a certain genre of people who love The Big Lebowski. It's become a cult niche. I think it has some great moments.
Hudsucker Proxy is another. I'm just throwing these out there.
Yeah. These are all what they call cult classic films because they grab a certain niche of the population, and it seems to pull them in. It's not your broad, wide range, what we call shotgun marketed films. These are more like sniper marketed films.
Did you start out doing cult, and now you've expanded? Were you a cult type of guy at one time? I kind of got the impression you were doing cult stuff at one time.
No, I had done one film called Extra Pulp, which was a B-rate pulp
Is that
film.
The one with Fred Harris?
No, Fred's been in two of mine. Both, yeah, he's been in both of them. Fred's a great actor, also a great attorney. But the Extra Pulp movie, we had it ready to go. Our other movie ran in 110 theaters nationwide. It's called Altered Courses. That was it was a drama. But I wanted to do a film that was over the top in every respect, and I wanted to do it in the B-rate fashion that was done in the old drive-in movie genres. You know, the machine gun girls with, babes with machine guns, and we did it, and it was definitely over the top. In fact, we had it ready to go in 90 theaters, and I went up, DCP'd it, put it on the servers, and I watched it in the theater. And a couple of people had come in and sat down at the end of it that were getting ready to watch another movie, and they were like aghast at all the blood across the screens and everything that was going on. And like, I guess you could compare it to an Italian horror film mixed with a pulp film. And when I seen that, we were handling a lot of other films. We were getting into larger and larger films, and the decision to pull it came fairly rapidly because it was over the top. I just got a request 2 days ago for the film, but it has never been released.
Machete is one. I mean, that's a grade B kind of thing. Machete. I think who's in it? Robert De Niro is in it. All these guys have signed up and everything. Machete. It's purely a bloodless kind of thing.
Yes, it is. Yes, some controversy behind that one. Which you can get into in another show.
Right.
But yeah, that's one of those pulp type movies.
Right. We have run out of time, Jerry, and I know you had a call coming in, so you're going to have to get back to. But one of these days, I want to get back and maybe go on the set with you and do some of that. Thanks for joining us today on the Digest.
Thank you, Herb.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Horry County Community Digest. I'm your host and fellow Horry County and Herb Malsman. How'd that go, and did you find anybody? And that was about a year and a half ago.
Yes. We've got a modeling and talent agency, which is run by another lady, but it's under Dalton Pictures and Entertainment. It's called Pro Models Inc., Pro Talent Inc., and it's run by Mary Beth Howard here at the beach. And that was to what happens is we do also commercial work outside the film industry. Like last year we did the Fox Bowl, and just got done with a contract with the military where we had to use some extras. So we always found trouble finding people at the last moment for talent, and it's like, why don't we have our own? And that's how that came into being.
Okay, I know you can't talk about what you did with the government.
Right.
Is there anything you could talk about, Eddie? Anything you could talk about? Then Jackie Kennedy Onassis, and the boss would say nobody's harder to reach than Jackie Kennedy Onassis. That's the way it was back then. Now, my guest today, we've been in touch over the last 6 or 7 months, but this is the first time we're actually sitting down. You're harder to sit down with than whoever. How you doing? This is Jerry Dalton Productions. I guess it's Dalton Productions.
Dalton Productions.
Filson.
It's Dalton Pictures, and we are a media company mainly working in the film industry.
That's your main film. Now, the first time we met, you were at Hampton Inn here.
Yes.
On 17 Business 17. You were doing auditions, some sort of a casting call. I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah, we did. I was a consultant on a media project for the United States Air Force, United States Navy, and ICE. ICE was unclassified. The other two are classified. One thing I can tell you inside the other two is I got to shoot a war scene in Iraq, which was pretty cool. That was fun. Basically, it's consulting, but I also did some shooting, scripting, and editing in preparation for the delivery of the content that was delivered to those agencies.
You were actually in Iraq for this, or it was a setup?
It was shot in Charleston.
It was shot in Charleston, right. But also looks like Iraq.
Yeah, it does. What we did was we found an old driving range where there was an old sand hill, and we went out and pulled all the weeds and everything, and we kept the camera tight so that you couldn't see any of the surrounding greenery. And it was hot enough. It was in August, so it was 105 degrees that day, a heat index. So everybody was sweating. It looked real.
So that's how Charleston becomes Iraq.
Yes.
Holy cow, that's amazing. You were in Los Angeles for a while. You did a thing with a Chinese audience, a Chinese group. Talk about that, and then we'll get into filmmaking a little bit. Give us how'd that go and what was happening there.
Okay, yeah, I work in Los Angeles it seems to be more and more. I guess that's because where the industry hub is. But I was taken out there to speak to the Chinese film.
Welcome to Horry County Community Digest.info. I'm your host and fellow Horry County and Herb Malsman. We are sitting outside of Starbucks right now at Long Bay Resort. Lots of sounds going on. The sounds of after the season, all the construction work and the painting and the sanding and the grinding and what's going on, cutting the trees down. So I guess this happens in the off season. Everybody's gone and the work begins. First, let me before I introduce our guest this week on the Digest. One of my many jobs, I was a telemarketer in New York City with New York Veteran Police Association. And it was a noble cause, I thought. And there was this one telemarketer, whenever he couldn't reach anybody, he would say, "You're harder to reach